Go for it.
Well, so just for my background, I was a reporter for 14 years, and then I have, for the last 12 years, operated a PR crisis management firm. And about 20% of that is political campaign. So I'm proud to report that my candidate, the campaign I managed in Detroit for 36th District Court judge, won by an overwhelming margin. So I tried to focus on that, to be real blunt. I tried to stay celebratory in that moment because the rest of me was not.
Will the judge have any influence on the Trump administration?
This is a local district court.
Local district, okay.
No, like I said, I just tried to stay in the glow of that moment because I was pretty much numb from the
Got it.
I actually had felt pretty optimistic because all the polling sites that we were covering for the campaign were packed. And so that made me think that perhaps, which we knew there needed to be a great black turnout, was going to be a good outcome for me. Pretty much I only work on left Dem causes anyway, so I'm not breaching some bias in here.
Okay.
So I felt things were going to be better, so I was numb and not entirely surprised but disappointed.
You probably weren't alone. Ms. Buss, please.
Sure. Well, I'm an editorial writer at the Detroit News. We kind of caused a little bit of an uproar by endorsing Gary Johnson. We heard quite a bit about that from both sides of the aisle. So I was really in neither Clinton or Trump's camp, but I have to say that even when Trump announced his candidacy a year and a half ago, I kind of had this feeling that he was going to win. I had a feeling he was going to beat all the Republicans in the primary and be quite successful in the general. I was apparently one of only a few people who thought this, but I wasn't too surprised, actually. I mean, once the numbers started coming in and it was becoming more of a reality, it became a little scarier. But I think he really captured kind of a deep sentiment in the country, so I wasn't too surprised that he ultimately succeeded. But it's definitely been a fascinating ride, and especially being in the media, it's been quite an election. So.
When somebody else in Detroit called the election for Hillary Clinton, what was the response in your newsroom?
Well, I'm about to have a baby, so I wasn't there at 3 in the morning. But
it was before 3 in the morning.
It was very early, and we don't like to criticize their friends.
I'm not
We work
giving
with
names.
them. But it was, it was too early to call that, and they probably should not have done that. We didn't do that. So.
Ms. Davis.
I was with your pollster. So when that happened, I was driving down to Detroit to be on one of the stations. Richard Schuba, the Detroit News pollster, was there, and all of us were looking at each other when the Detroit Free Press call came in because it seemed rather premature. And by the time I was wrapped with my segment, it seemed wildly inaccurate to me based on the numbers.
Well, wait a second. In their defense, all the numbers leading up had her in Michigan.
No, I don't criticize them at all. And Tom Kiska has a method, and it worked well for the governor's race back in 2014. It's just that it did not capture, just like the public polling did not capture what was going on.
Okay, would you mind passing the mic down to Kathy? Kathy, welcome to East Lansing. We're asking for opening reflections on how we felt at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever on election night.
Well, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I actually was asleep. I had to be up super early in the morning, but I will say very quickly, unlike some of my media counterparts here, I was watching the elections across the street from my house. I have a disabled Marine who lives across the street who is a Trump supporter, and he invited some of his friends over who were die-hard Trump supporters. They had the hats, they had the t-shirts boasting of their deplorableness. And it was really interesting watching the election from their perspective. And the friends that were over, they were all Trump supporters, very ardent, but they were also union members, which was kind of an interesting dynamic, given union support of primarily being Democrats. So anyway, as we were watching the results roll in, we did also see the Free Press calling for Clinton, and something I had been saying since well before Election Day, and hopefully this didn't get said. I do apologize for my tardiness. I told Linda, as a Wolverine, that's what you get when you invite a Wolverine to East Lansing. It's a conspiracy. They try to keep me from coming in. But anyway.
It's rigged.
It's a conspiracy. But anyway, something we have been talking about, at home and amongst friends and colleagues is that I think the polls were just wildly inaccurate leading up to the election because so many people did not want to admit they were voting for Trump. And given, the vitriol surrounding being a Trump supporter in social media and in a lot of places, I think people were just either saying they were voting for Hillary or saying they were undecided. So as the evening wore on, I was becoming less and less surprised at the results. So
let's just ask the delegates in the room, by your applause, how many people agree with that statement that a lot of people didn't want to tell the pollsters for whom they were voting because either one, they didn't want others. Just applaud. Would you applaud? How many people do not believe that? Would you applaud? Wow, let's talk to these people because obviously they're smarter than everybody else. So, okay, would you mind standing for me? What is your name?
My name is Luke.
Luke, all right, fire away.
I just think that there were a lot of undecided people, and they broke to Trump at the last minute, and there was a higher percentage of people that were undecided.
Did you have any people in your peer group that were Trump supporters?
I do. I'm from northern Michigan. So, although I'm not a Trump supporter, my friends and family are. Yeah. So
what did they say to you when they said, no, we're voting for Mr. Trump?
most of them were, they're Republicans and they were sticking with their party, and it was a lot about Second Amendment stuff. So yeah, they're hunters.
Whereabouts in northern Michigan?
Manistee County.
Okay, I'm from, spent part of my years in Gaylord, so
Yeah.
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends in the UP and stuff, same thing.
All right, so what is this? Yeah, go ahead.
Here's where I think it came into play for sure with people of color. He did better than Romney, as I understand,
By 2 points.
with blacks and Latinos. And I did some tour to Georgia, and I really believe if there were some folks lying about it, those were the folks for sure lying about it.
What does this vote say about the state of Michigan? What kind of people are we?
I don't think you can make broad generalizations from any election. I mean, what, did we totally become a different kind of people since 2008? I sincerely doubt it. We just happen to vote a different way.
Anybody think it goes deeper than that?
I think one of the only explanations, and I think there are a few, is the economy and the real hardship that a lot of people have had over the past few years. I mean, you saw whites, or not just whites, but women vote for Trump in a way that no one thought would happen. And I'm not sure what the explanation is for that, except for economic hardship and perhaps some, they liked that he was authentic or something like that, anti-establishment sentiments. But I think the economy had a lot to do with it at the end of the day.
Darcy, why are you shaking your head?
Well, mine is from the communication side, and historically the rule is you got to tell people why they should vote for you, and the analysis that I got afterwards, and what I said all along is Hillary never gave people a reason to vote for her. This analysis said that 100% of her ads were anti-Trump. Now, I saw something in like the last 48 hours that was like really diverse and optimistic and inspiring, but that was in the last 48 hours. They said that his message was clearer. Now, so I challenge everybody in this room, name Hillary's message, and then name at least one of Trump's. I think there were so many other factors, but that to me was a huge one.
The observation was her best performance at the election was the day after. That speech was spot on. It had empathy, it had emotion, it had humanism, it had all the stuff that was missing from the general election. Can I get an amen? Amen. Ms. Demas, react to that. You don't believe it?
I don't know. I don't run campaigns, so that's not my bailiwick. You'd have to ask my husband. That's what he does. I'm just a political observer. I definitely think there's something to be said that you have to define yourself in a positive way and to show a message.
Don't you have to touch the people?
You do, but I'm not sure in what way Trump did. I mean,
Whoa.
honestly, no, but in a positive
Whoa, wait a second. Suze,
in a positive way.
I didn't say positive, I said touch.
That was my point, though.
Well, he didn't have to touch him. You know what? His touch for them was positive.
I don't know if it was, but you're saying if we go with the idea that Hillary has to touch people in a positive way, I don't think we can say that Trump necessarily did. He certainly reached people on a visceral level. There's no doubt about that. But you know how we go back to in 2000, who do you want to have a beer with? I never heard from Trump supporters that they wanted to have a beer with him. I heard they wanted him to kick people's asses. So
And then have a beer.
no, they didn't really want to sit down with him. They just liked that he was going to kick ass and make America great again. And that's a great message for this year, but it's not a positive message.
Oh, you didn't see this, but Kathy was shaking her head. What's up?
Oh, well, I'm not quite sure that Donald Trump drinks. Is that something?
He does not.
And in
Does
2000,
not.
I mean, George W. Bush doesn't drink either, so I thought that was a horrible, comparison, litmus test. But very quickly, I do think that Hillary, and again, I don't do campaigns either, I just observe them. So take that with a grain of salt. But what I saw, I felt like the Hillary campaign was dismissive of a lot of people. I mean, she canceled a speech at Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame, and it was very important for her to try to get some Catholic votes. From what I understand, she did not spend very much time in places like Wisconsin. She didn't, spend a lot of time in Michigan. Surrogates were here, and certainly she had people on the ground here working very hard. But she didn't spend a lot of time here personally. And I think, that's a dismissive, reflection. And if I'm a voter, I'm looking at that going, does she really think that Michigan's in the bag for her? Does she really think Wisconsin's in the bag for her? That's just an observation. And in terms of touching people, you had Trump going out saying, I'm going to repeal Obamacare. I'm going to, get rid of all these trade deals that have taken all these jobs away from Michigan and Michigan manufacturers. I mean, granted their campaign promises, but you know what? They touched people a lot more than I think some of the things that Hillary Clinton's campaign was saying.
All right, Ms. Buss, go ahead, please.
She had a great, she took a walk, I think, was it yesterday? I'm not sure what happened this week, but, and, that woman that ran into her took a picture, and it's a beautiful picture, and she looks happy, and, she doesn't have a lot of makeup on, and I think just, if she had let her guard down a little bit more throughout the campaign and let people see that side of her, I mean, it was really powerful to see that, and it's too bad that it came the day after the election.
Darcy, do you think that she actually could have won this race, given the dynamics that were going on?
I do, but I think there's some other factors. I do think in terms of touching the voters, I think she lost Michigan to Bernie in the primary. And there was a huge bit of ground to make up with millennials. I think she just completely ceded that in the primary. We've historically had this ongoing challenge of outreach to African American voters, which typically starts in Michigan after Labor Day, and then the real expense comes in like the last month. And as far as I can tell, the engagement for the ground game in those communities happened like the last 2 weeks. And so to me, there just was not enough done in that arena. I do have a knock against the press corps, and I think I can speak with authority because I always shun the whole horse race coverage. And the dominant coverage through this entire campaign is who's ahead in the polls, with a period at the end of that sentence. And so no one ever really got a chance to talk about, in a significant way, real positions, real policy, real anything. It was nonstop, that kind of stuff.
But it was not unique to this campaign.
Well, I think it's gotten worse over time, though, as we've had, with digital, with, talking heads shows that are way more prevalent than they used to be, the different channels that are out there. So, to me, that was the dominant theme across the board.
Does anybody on the panel believe that the media helped to create Donald Trump? Whoa, I guess let's move to a different question. Okay? No, Ms. Buss, check in on that.
Certainly, I mean, when he announced his candidacy, the media went crazy, and they never really died down from...
Why did they go crazy?
think it was just, I'm trying to remember back to what the coverage was.
Ratings and eyeballs.
Right, and yeah, they definitely helped prop him up, but it's also a completely different atmosphere for, I think, for, elections that we've moved into now with Twitter, and he definitely helped spur his own kind of show. So the media couldn't turn their eyes away. I mean, there was just something every hour to report on.
You agree with that, Ms. Demas?
I think that Donald Trump single-handedly turned around CNN. I mean, that's quite a feat. And I'm not being facetious. It was wall-to-wall coverage. It was like the new missing airplane, the Malaysia flight all over again. And that never really stopped. There was ironically a lot of skepticism in conservative media because the perception was that he wasn't a serious candidate, he wasn't a true conservative. They were much more in favor of Ted Cruz and some of the other candidates, but as he seemed to tap into that vein of anger, you saw the coverage in Fox News and in the right-wing media pick up quite a bit in the fall and the run-up to the primary.
Kathy, did the Republican Party nationally make a mistake by not coalescing around somebody else on that stage other than Mr. Trump early on?
Early on, I would say yes. Early on, I would say, you know what, if you want a serious candidate, if you want a statesman, and all those other things, I would say yes. Ryan Priebus and the National Party, what are you people doing? But, I think at the end of the day, I don't know how they can go back and say, well, gee, we should have coalesced around, Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush.
Well, and not to put words in your mouth, but by the time they figured it out where this train was going, it was too late.
Right, and an interesting byproduct, because they did sort of back off and say, you know what, we're going to let this train go wherever it may. Let's focus on Senate races, let's focus on congressional races, and look what happened. I guess in the end, for the Republicans, things seem to work out, and it may be just an unintended consequence of Ryan's pulling up.
The distinguished Democratic floor leader.
I'm so happy to have a panel of women to talk about the elections. And yesterday we were interviewing an MPLP applicant who criticized President Obama because he didn't feel like he had done enough in the African American community. And on a personal level, I felt like, well, that's a really tough, if he had done more, he would have been accused as the black president pandering, just to his own. Catelyn, when you said, how beautiful she looked with her makeup down, I have a two-part question. One is, what do you make of, I just felt like she had such a burden as the first woman. It was unstated, but, is she tough enough? Is she real? How do you think that played out? And then the second thing, given how women voted, just on a personal level, what do you make of that in terms of women supporting other women in leadership?
Well, I think it was certainly hard for her. It's hard
That
for
wasn't just you.
Okay. Well, I'll start with, it's hard for a woman to reach that balance in any professional situation of, putting your guard down but remaining, authentic and strong. And she had a very hard job. I think her job was made even harder by the fact that she's been around so long, and she had, not necessarily even to her fault, but she had so much baggage with her. And she had her marriage. She had, 30, 40 years of just stuff that's happened. I think for the next woman that runs from either party, it'll be much easier because there probably won't be that much baggage, and they'll have an easier time being evaluated on their merits and not with the crap that she kind of had to carry around with her. That's kind of my thoughts on what she went through, particularly.
One thing I was struck by, in talking with a lot of Hillary voters, inevitably they came back to their daughters and their granddaughters and how proud they were of the moment to cast a ballot. And I think all of us have seen those really touching stories about some women who were born before suffrage and they finally got to vote. That was an undercurrent. I never saw that really break through that much in too much of the coverage. But, I have, in going back and talking with some of those voters after the election, there's a real sense of betrayal. There's a real confusion because they don't really know what to tell their daughters or their granddaughters, because the mantra was always, you can do anything. And, then the first female presidential candidate for a major party gets beaten by somebody who's never run for office seriously before. And, this is not to say that she was a perfect candidate and, it's all everybody else's fault. But, for voters who believed in her, for women in particular, I think it's been a pretty rough week.
A couple of quick observations. I told a lot of people, so I sort of quipped, but I was a little bit serious, and that is, if a Hillary Rodham were on the ballot, I would kind of have a little more, I don't want to say respect, I think I would have a little more feeling toward that in terms of being a woman, but again, that's just me. I'm very familiar with that. But Caitlin wrote a piece a while back, and it was probably one of the best, it was the best reflection I have seen about a woman, female millennial voter. And I think that Caitlin's, I don't want to put words in your mouth because you did it so eloquently, and it was so wonderful. And Caitlin gave a sort of a first-person perspective of being a millennial woman in this election, in this time. And it was kind of like, okay, so we have a woman running for president. I'm supposed to be excited about it? Nah. We've got, female leaders all over the world, female CEOs. That's the world that Caitlin has grown up with. So when you get to this, as far as just the female part of it, it's like, and I think that was very, very reflective in it, and it was very well spoken.
And that's not to say that issues, particularly for women, didn't make a difference for me. I have to say that I ultimately, I'm a conservative-leaning person. And the thing about Trump, there were a lot of things, but the thing that I just couldn't get behind was his comments about women. And so, I didn't end up supporting Hillary for kind of economic reasons, and I ended up not supporting Trump for women reasons. So it's kind of ironic, but, I think it just crosses gender.
Darcy, before you go to you, in the room when you guys had a discussion about that endorsement, how many votes were there for Mr. Trump?
Oh, I can't tell you. We unanimously agreed.
No, I know how that works. We have the debate, we take a phony vote, and then we take the real one. No, on the straw vote that was taken first, how many Trump votes were there?
Not enough. We never.
All right, go ahead, Darcy. Go ahead, Darcy.
Nice try.
Well, I was just going to say, I didn't think that the framing from her was about being a woman and running as a woman, per se. But it still comes back to what I said earlier, that the framing just wasn't there. And Bernie framed her in the primary in a manner that motivated millennials to be against her, dislike her, and all of that. And this data that I saw again across the board in almost every category, the turnout was down. So it was just not only not framing, but also not aggressive enough in going after those folks that are part of your base or that you're trying to convert.
Okay, we got a couple of questions here. Let's turn over. Please, are you?
How much is the medium the message? I mean, would Trump be president if it were a newspaper-only election?
Wow, that's a great question.
By the way, I would vote no
I
on
actually
that.
have a chart on this one, but the headline says newspaper endorsements don't matter. Because Trump essentially got maybe 1 or 2 newspaper endorsements. And, well, the KKK is not a newspaper. Or they might have one, I don't know.
They have one.
But the question was, if it was a newspaper-only environment, would this guy be president?
I tend to hesitate to say that we're that powerful, but his shtick is meant for television. And it does not come across the same way in print.
So that's a yes to the question.
So I would be more inclined to say that he would have an uphill battle. But, like I said, Tim, sad to say, we're not all powerful.
That's true. Kathy?
I agree with that. Look how many newspapers around the country endorsed Gary Johnson, including the Detroit News. There were plenty, and maybe one day long ago, newspapers didn't matter that much, and maybe there would be a little more influence, but I think I agree with my colleagues here.
Darce?
I mean, I think everything is impacted by the real-time social media, 24/7 news cycle environment. It's a different ball game when everything's happening real time and playing over and over again. It's just a whole different dynamic. But people don't trust or like them. They didn't like it when I was there 12 years ago, and they really don't like it now. And he ginned up that whole line of thinking as well. So. Yeah, it's just a whole different animal.
All right, question here. Yeah, I think everybody would probably agree to some degree or another that Trump has got to be one of the great branders of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And he exhibited that in the way he branded Hillary. My thinking is that had it not been, and he did that with volume and repetition, not a lot of credibility in a lot of what he was saying. My impression is that the reason it stuck so well on her was because of the job that had been done by Bernie, branding her, and truly one of the most credible people to ever run for office in American politics. And then you later heard Trump repeating that Bernie Sanders got screwed by the rigged system. So I'm just wondering what we talk a lot about the branding Trump did. What was the effect of Bernie, from your perspective, in branding her initially?
Yeah, I think the Bernie story is one of the great tragedies of this election. I mean, he had great success in the primary, and I think the Democrats made a huge mistake in overlooking that and thinking that the supporters would fall in line behind Hillary. So I don't even know that it was as much Bernie as his supporters were so passionate. And I don't know the breakdown of how they eventually voted, or if they didn't vote at all, but it was rigged against him, and I think they felt that, and I think the DNC is making some adjustments now to fix that.
Should she put him on the ticket?
Him or someone like Elizabeth Warren, I think she made a huge mistake with thinking.
Anybody else on Ricky's question?
I think the damage that Bernie did was really damaging her credibility. She didn't come off as authentic, and it got to her honesty. I mean, I've covered a lot of scandals in my day. I never thought that emails would be sexy enough that people would remember that. I mean, that's about as boring as you can come. This is not Force or Gamrat. But emails became code for...
We were doing so well.
Emails became code for she's a liar and worse. And it was very effective, and I'm not sure that, it was Bernie's intention to castigate her, but, he certainly had authenticity, and Trump was very clever to build off of his arguments, and, certainly he didn't pull any punches.
One quick comment, since we're on the topic of emails real quick, Tim. I was on Off the Record with you more than a year and a half ago or something, before the primaries, and I said those emails were going to continue to be a problem, and everybody at the table, no, they won't. I said, yes, they are. So you heard
We
it.
actually erased that tape. My apologies.
But I do agree with that, Caitlin, and you, sir, too, that Bernie was, or is, I mean, I have a great deal of respect for Bernie and his campaign, and he's one of these people who can go to sleep at night because everything he says is everything he believes in. He's an honest liberal, and he's passionate about it. And yeah, he did a masterful job, framing Hillary the way he did, and I do believe that the system was rigged against him, and I think that's a shame.
The other thing that's here that the Bernieites occupy, the Trumpites occupy, is their struggles and the economy. I think that was referenced earlier, and people in the anti-establishment center. Even though Trump's deck will be fully stacked with all establishment people, when he gets in there, if you look at the names that are being bandied about now, but that is a key part of this that I think that people just weren't recognizing or addressing enough. Hillary on her side maybe with folks, and then Trump on the side private is
Okay, we need to wrap this up, but let me just dovetail with this.
So yeah, I have my,
Okay, I'm sorry, I've been sitting in the back sleeping. Here you
No,
go,
that's
here,
right. So
here,
the
hang
one
on,
thing,
hang on.
and so the one thing that we talked a lot about before the election was race. And after the election, it's been kind of radio silence. So I'm just kind of curious, how much do you think that Trump's win was also backlash, much like what Van Jones, and I don't know if anybody saw what Van Jones's comments were. So I'm just kind of curious in terms of your perspective on that.
Oh, I mean, that's absolutely a factor, a huge factor, and a lot of his talking points were racially driven, racially motivated. Leading into the election, we had all the protests, all the movements around the loss of Black lives, endless video. But I take it a lot further back than that, with the Tea Party movement, when Obama took office, and the folks that started to gin up that machine, you know, in every way possible, and it's been building and building. And this was the first time they had a champion on such a large scale. When they tried to raise this type of approach with McCain, he pushed back. Romney, he pushed back, and Trump said, come on. And so absolutely, that was a factor, and I don't think anybody's denying that. Really? I mean, I'm missing.
Well, it's what I think is interesting is that there was lots of conversation about race and coming together and how do we build cultural competencies. But now those conversations have kind of ceased, and so I think that there's still a need for them to continue, probably even more so now. And so I'm just wondering how do we resurrect that, particularly in the media? Because now, I mean, post-election, kind of all those conversations cease. So,
Well, I mean, if you're asking for a roadmap, I think the people who were fearful of that are even more fearful and trying to figure a way forward if we were going about it. What do we do? Man, I remember one of my best friends called me and in tears and said, what do we do? And then I reminded her that I live in Michigan, so kind of been dealing with some aspects of that for about 8 years now anyway. And she said, why do you do it? And so you just never stop the fight, you know. But the folks who were in denial about it, this is a great time because they're about as empathetic as they can possibly be and willing to figure out a way forward. So I think it's a fair question to make sure that the media stays engaged in discussion.
Is it a fair observation to suggest that perhaps what we saw in the campaign was an act, and that now we're going to see the real Donald Trump? Does anybody buy into that at all? If you listen to the conversation between he and the president, okay, that was very warm, wasn't it? Huh? I'm going to use him as counsel. What do you suppose the guys in the red truck drinking beer thought about that?
I have no idea what they thought, but I've been hearing that we're going to get a softer, gentler, more presidential Trump since the primary. Remember, how many times did we hear pivot?
But he couldn't pivot. That's the point, Suze. He couldn't pivot because he was playing to the base.
No, that's what you're supposed to do in a general. You're supposed to say, oh, that Muslim ban, just kidding. The wall, just kidding. You know what we have to do in the Republican primary. Let's all come together. And he didn't do that. He ran a base campaign. Now, if he doesn't want to function that way as president, that's great. But his first act as president was ditching his press pool. And his second act was taking to Twitter and criticizing protest, which is still protected under the First Amendment. And you are seeing an awful lot of incidents across this country and in Michigan where there are racial slurs being painted on people's houses.
How about DeWitt Junior High?
How about my daughter in Okemos being surrounded by a group of older boys screaming, lock her up, because she had a sign calling for peace. This is Okemos. This is where you and I live, Tim. So this is some ugly stuff, and I hope that it goes away rather quickly because this is not what we need right now.
All right, we have a question here, please.
Well, it's not exactly a question, but just in going along with what you just said, Susan. I have a friend, too, a black friend in Okemos, who came out and saw a noose hanging in her tree in her front yard. And you think that's not scary. I mean, that's unbelievable. In Okemos,
And in Royal Oak, in the cafeteria where they were chanting "Build the Wall," so because there was Mexican American students there. I'm of the theory people show you they are, believe them. You know, I understand some people felt optimistic about his acceptance speech. I'm not there. I probably won't be there because, just like she said, this is where you immediately set the tone. And his first act is to, like, yeah,
Whatever. The question was he told to give that speech, or was that speech from the heart? That's the question. And wait, we can debate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a nice round of applause for our panel.